She thought she was marrying a disabled man, until a billionaire surprise stunned the guests. Sarah Martinez had always believed that love sees beyond appearances. At 28, she worked as a nurse at St. Mary's Hospital, spending her days caring for others with a gentle heart that never seemed to run dry. Her friends often teased her about being too kind, too trusting, but Sarah believed that kindness was never wasted. It was on a rainy Tuesday evening when she first met David Chun. Sarah was leaving the hospital after a long shift when she noticed a man in a wheelchair struggling to open the heavy glass doors. Without hesitation, she rushed over to help. "Thank you so much," David said, his warm brown eyes meeting hers. "These doors seem to have a personal grudge against me." Sarah laughed at his joke. "I'm Sarah, and you're welcome. Are you visiting someone here?" "I'm David. Actually, I was here for a consultation with Dr. Peterson about my condition." He gestured to his wheelchair. "Spinal injury from a car accident 3 years ago." Something about David's gentle demeanor and quick wit drew Sarah in immediately. They talked for nearly an hour in the hospital lobby, discovering they both loved old movies, had a passion for helping others, and shared the same favorite coffee shop downtown. "Would you maybe like to get coffee sometime?" David asked hesitantly. "I mean, if you're not too busy saving lives and all." Sarah smiled. "I'd love that." Over the next few months, their friendship blossomed into something beautiful. David was unlike anyone Sarah had ever met. He was intelligent, funny, and had an incredible way of making her feel special. He worked from home as a freelance graphic designer, he told her, which allowed him flexibility with his condition. Their first official date was at the small coffee shop they both loved. David insisted on paying, though Sarah noticed he seemed careful with money. He always chose the least expensive items on the menu and often mentioned having to budget carefully due to his medical expenses. "I'm sorry I can't take you to fancy restaurants," David said one evening as they shared a pizza in his modest apartment. "My insurance doesn't cover everything, and freelance work isn't exactly steady." Sarah reached across the table and took his hand. "David, I don't care about fancy restaurants. I care about spending time with you. This is perfect." His apartment was small but cozy, filled with his artwork and photography. Sarah noticed he never displayed any family photos, and when she asked about his family, David's expression would grow distant. "My parents died in the same accident that left me like this," he explained quietly. "I don't have any other family. It's just been me for the past 3 years." Sarah's heart ached for him. She couldn't imagine facing such tragedy alone. From that moment, she became even more determined to show David that he wasn't alone anymore. As their relationship deepened, Sarah noticed that David was incredibly private about certain aspects of his life. He never wanted to go out to crowded places, preferring quiet walks in the park or movie nights at home. When Sarah suggested meeting her friends, David would find polite excuses to decline. "I'm just not comfortable in social situations yet," he explained. "The accident changed me in more ways than just physically. I prefer our quiet moments together." Sarah understood. She had seen many patients struggle with the emotional aftermath of trauma. She never pushed him, instead choosing to create a safe space where David could heal at his own pace. 6 months into their relationship, David began talking about the future. "Sarah, I know I'm not the man most women would choose. I can't offer you the life you deserve. I can't even promise I'll always be able to work consistently." "David Chun, stop right there," Sarah interrupted firmly. "You are exactly the man I choose. Every day I choose you. Your wheelchair doesn't define you. Your beautiful heart does." That night, David cried in her arms. It was the first time Sarah had seen him truly vulnerable, and it only made her love him more. A year after they met, David proposed. It wasn't elaborate or expensive, just the two of them in their favorite spot by the lake, with a simple ring he had saved months to buy. "Sarah Martinez, you've given me hope when I thought I had none left. Will you marry me and let me spend the rest of my life trying to make you as happy as you've made me?" Through tears of joy, Sarah said yes. The engagement brought new challenges. Sarah's family loved David immediately, but they were concerned about the practical aspects of their future together. "Honey, we adore David," her mother said gently during a private conversation. "But have you thought about finances? About the challenges you'll face? Marriage is hard enough without additional obstacles." "Mom, love isn't about ease," Sarah replied. "David is the kindest, most genuine man I've ever known. We'll figure out the rest together." David continued to worry about money. He insisted on a small budget wedding. "Sarah, I wish I could give you the wedding of your dreams, but we need to be practical. Maybe just close family and a few friends." Sarah agreed, but secretly, her heart broke a little. She had always dreamed of sharing her special day with everyone she loved. Still, she reminded herself that the wedding was just one day. Their marriage was what truly mattered. As the wedding planning progressed, David seemed increasingly anxious. He would sometimes disappear for hours, claiming he had work deadlines or medical appointments. When Sarah offered to accompany him, he would politely but firmly decline. "I don't want you to see me at my weakest moments," he explained. "Let me handle this part of my life on my own." Sarah respected his wishes, though she sometimes felt shut out. She attributed his behavior to pre-wedding nerves and the stress of managing his condition. 3 weeks before the wedding, something strange happened. Sarah was at the grocery store when she overheard 2 women talking. "Did you see that article about the Chin Industries heir?" one woman said. "Apparently, he disappeared 3 years ago after some kind of accident. The company's been looking for him ever since." "Chin Industries? Isn't that the tech company worth billions?" the other woman replied. Sarah's blood ran cold. Chin was a common name, she told herself. It was just a coincidence, but a nagging feeling settled in her stomach. That evening, she casually brought up the conversation. "I heard something interesting today about a company called Chin Industries. Have you ever heard of them?" David's face went pale for just a moment before he recovered. "No, never heard of them." "Why?" "Oh, it's nothing. Just curious." But Sarah noticed David seemed distracted for the rest of the evening. 2 days before the wedding, David's behavior became even more erratic. He was constantly on phone calls, speaking in hushed tones, and moving to another room whenever Sarah approached. When she asked about it, he claimed it was last-minute work projects. The night before their wedding, David was unusually quiet during their rehearsal dinner. Sarah's family had rented a small private room at a local restaurant. As they practiced their vows, David seemed nervous beyond the normal pre-wedding jitters. "Tomorrow, everything changes," he whispered to Sarah as they said goodnight. "I hope you'll forgive me." "Forgive you for what?" Sarah asked, confused. David just kissed her forehead. "For not being completely honest about who I am." Sarah spent the night tossing and turning, David's words echoing in her mind. What could he possibly need forgiveness for? The morning of the wedding arrived bright and beautiful. Sarah woke in her childhood bedroom, surrounded by her bridesmaids, her sister Jessica, and her best friend from nursing school, Maria. "You're glowing, Sarah," Jessica said as she helped with the wedding dress, a simple but elegant gown they had found at a discount bridal shop. "I'm so nervous," Sarah admitted. "But good nervous, you know." As they prepared for the ceremony, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was different about today. It felt bigger somehow, more significant than she had expected. The wedding was taking place at a small community center that David had chosen because it was wheelchair accessible and affordable. Sarah had decorated it herself with flowers from the local grocery store and white ribbons. When it was time to leave for the venue, Sarah's father took her hands. "Sweetheart, are you absolutely certain about this? It's not too late to wait if you have any doubts." "Daddy, I've never been more certain of anything in my life. David is my soulmate." At the community center, Sarah was surprised to see more cars in the parking lot than expected. "Looks like some people brought extra guests," Jessica commented. Inside the bridal suite, Sarah put the finishing touches on her makeup when Maria burst through the door. "Sarah, you need to see what's happening out there," she said, eyes wide with excitement and confusion. "What do you mean?" "There are news vans outside, and photographers, and some very expensive-looking cars just pulled up." Sarah's heart began racing. That doesn't make sense. We didn't invite any media. Before she could process what was happening, the wedding coordinator knocked on the door. Ms. Martinez, your fiancé would like to speak with you privately before the ceremony. Sarah found David in a small side room, looking more nervous than she had ever seen him. He was impeccably dressed in a tuxedo that looked far more expensive than anything they had discussed. David, what's going on? Maria says there are news crews outside. David took her hands, his own trembling slightly. Sarah, I need to tell you something before we go through with this ceremony. Something I should have told you a long time ago. Sarah's heart pounded. You're scaring me. I haven't been completely honest with you about who I am, David began. My name is David Chun, and that part is true. But I'm not a freelance graphic designer struggling to make ends meet. Sarah stared at him, confusion and fear mixing in her chest. 3 years ago, I was the heir to Chin Industries, the technology company my grandfather built into a billion-dollar empire. I was supposed to take over as CEO on my 30th birthday. Sarah felt the room spinning. What are you saying? The car accident that injured my spine. It happened the night I was running away from my life. I couldn't handle the pressure, the expectations, the fake relationships with people who only wanted my money. So I staged my disappearance. I've been living under a false identity ever since. This is insane, Sarah whispered. You're telling me you're a billionaire? Yes, but Sarah, please understand, I never meant for it to go this far. I was going to tell you the truth, but then I fell in love with you. Real love. For the first time in my life, someone loved me for who I am, not what I have. Sarah felt like she was in a dream. So everything has been a lie. The small apartment, worrying about money, the modest wedding. The love is real, David said desperately. My feelings for you are the only real thing in my life. I've been living as David, the struggling graphic designer, because that's who I want to be. With you, I found out who I really am underneath all the wealth and expectations. Before Sarah could respond, Jessica burst into the room. Sarah, you really need to see this. There are hundreds of people outside now, and someone claiming to be David's grandfather is here. David closed his eyes. He found me. How? Sarah asked, still reeling. I had to use my real identity to get our marriage license. I thought I had more time before anyone noticed. The door opened, and an elderly Asian man in an expensive suit walked in, followed by several people in business attire. David, the man said with relief and frustration in his voice. 3 years. 3 years I've been searching for my grandson. David straightened in his wheelchair. Hello, grandfather. The old man's eyes filled with tears as he approached David's wheelchair. I thought I had lost you forever. Sarah watched this reunion, feeling like an outsider in her own wedding. And you must be Sarah, David's grandfather said, turning to her with kind eyes. I'm James Chun. I owe you a debt of gratitude for taking care of my grandson. I don't understand what's happening, Sarah said honestly. Ms. Martinez, James Chun said gently. My grandson is the heir to Chin Industries. When he disappeared after his accident, we've been searching ever since. The company has been holding his position, waiting for his return. David looked at Sarah with desperate eyes. I know this is overwhelming. I know I should have told you sooner, but I was terrified of losing you. Losing me to what? Sarah asked. To gold diggers, to people who would pretend to love me for my money. You love me for who I am. That's all I've ever wanted. The wedding coordinator appeared in the doorway. I'm sorry to interrupt, but there are several hundred people outside now, including media crews. Should we proceed with the ceremony or postpone? Sarah looked around the room, at David, his grandfather, the business associates, her sister. Her simple wedding had turned into a circus. Sarah, David said quietly, I understand if you need time to process this. We can postpone the wedding. I can explain everything. But as Sarah looked at David, really looked at him, she saw the same man she had fallen in love with, the same gentle eyes, the same kind smile, the same person who had cried in her arms and made her laugh and chosen to spend quiet evenings with her instead of going out. Are you still the man who helps elderly patients feel less scared in the hospital lobby? She asked. Yes. Are you still the person who insists on paying for coffee even when money is tight? David smiled slightly. Well, money isn't actually tight, but yes, I'm still the person who wants to take care of you. Are you still the man who holds me when I've had a difficult day at work? Always. Sarah took a deep breath. Then let's get married. David's face lit up with relief and joy. Really? Really? But first, I think we need to address the crowd outside. James Chin stepped forward. If I may suggest, we could move the ceremony to Chin Manor. It's large enough to accommodate everyone, and it would be more appropriate for a Chin family wedding. Sarah looked at David. What do you think? I think, David said, taking her hands, that I want to marry you wherever you'll have me. But I also think it's time I stop running from who I am. 30 minutes later, a convoy of cars was making its way across town to Chin Manor, a sprawling estate that Sarah had never imagined existed. The media followed a respectful distance, documenting what was quickly becoming the story of the year. Chin Manor was breathtaking, a modern architectural masterpiece set on 50 acres of beautifully landscaped grounds. As they pulled up the circular driveway, Sarah saw staff members quickly setting up an outdoor wedding ceremony that looked like something from a fairy tale. David, Sarah said as they sat in the car, this is incredible, but it's not us. What do you mean? This. She gestured to the mansion and the elaborate setup. It's beautiful, but it's not who we are together. We're coffee shop dates and movie nights and helping each other through difficult days. David smiled. You're right, but maybe it can be both. Maybe we can have the fairy tale wedding and still be us. As Sarah was helped from the car, she was amazed by the transformation taking place around them. What had been planned as a simple ceremony for 50 people was becoming an elaborate celebration for 300 guests, business associates, family friends, and media representatives. But the most surprising part was how many people seemed genuinely happy to see David. David! Called a young woman who hurried over in a wheelchair. I can't believe you're finally back. Lisa, David's face lit up. I didn't know you'd be here. Your grandfather called everyone from the Chin Foundation for spinal injury research. We've all been hoping you'd come home. Sarah learned that David's company had a foundation that provided support and resources for people with spinal injuries. He started it after his accident. Lisa explained to Sarah. Even while he was missing, his grandfather kept it running in his honor. As more people approached David, Sarah began to understand the impact his disappearance had on others. He wasn't just a billionaire hiding from responsibility. He was someone whose work had touched many lives. The ceremony was moved to a beautiful garden pavilion overlooking a lake. White flowers and ribbons transformed the space into something magical, but what struck Sarah most was how David's face had changed. The constant worry and sadness she had noticed over the past year was gone. He looked free. Ladies and gentlemen, James Chin addressed the assembled crowd. Today we celebrate not just the marriage of my grandson David and his beautiful bride Sarah, but also David's return to his family and his role in Chin Industries. As Sarah walked down the aisle on her father's arm, she saw David waiting for her at the altar. He was still in his wheelchair, still the man she had fallen in love with, but now he seemed complete in a way he hadn't before. The ceremony itself was beautiful. David and Sarah had written their own vows, and when it came time for David to speak, his words brought tears to many eyes. Sarah Martinez, a year ago I was hiding from my life, ashamed of my limitations, afraid of being hurt again. You saw past my wheelchair, past my fears, and loved me when I couldn't love myself. You taught me that being vulnerable isn't a weakness. It's the only way to truly connect with another person. He paused, looking at the crowd, then back at Sarah. I spent 3 years running from responsibility, thinking that money and expectations were all people saw in me. But you saw David the man, not David the heir. You gave me the courage to be both. Sarah wiped away tears as she began her vows. David Chun, you taught me that love isn't about fixing someone or saving someone. It's about standing beside them and choosing them every day. Today I'm not just marrying the man I fell in love with. I'm marrying the man who had the courage to trust me with his heart. When they were pronounced husband and wife, the cheer from the crowd was thunderous. As David and Sarah kissed, photographers captured the moment, but Sarah barely noticed. All she could see was her husband's radiant smile. The reception was held in a grand ballroom in the manor. Sarah was overwhelmed by the elegance, crystal chandeliers, gourmet food, a live orchestra, but David never left her side, making sure she felt comfortable in this new world. During their first dance, David looked up at Sarah. "Are you okay with all this?" "I'm okay with anything as long as you're honest with me from now on," Sarah replied. "No more secrets," David promised. "I want to share everything with you, my life, my work, my family legacy. But I also want to keep being the man who fell in love with the nurse who helps people every day." As the evening progressed, Sarah met more people from David's world. She learned about the charitable work Chin Industries did, the scholarships they provided, the medical research they funded. She began to understand that David hadn't just inherited money. He had inherited a legacy of helping others. "Mrs. Chun," James Chin approached her during a quiet moment. "I wanted to thank you." "For what?" "For giving my grandson back his purpose. He's been lost since his accident, but watching him with you, I can see he's found his way home." Later that evening, as the last guests were leaving, David and Sarah found themselves alone on the manor's terrace, looking out over the lake. "So, Mrs. Chun," David said with a grin, "how does it feel to be married to a billionaire?" Sarah laughed. "Honestly, it feels exactly like being married to David the graphic designer, except with better catering." They both laughed, but then Sarah grew serious. "David, I need you to promise me something." "Anything. Promise me we'll still have pizza nights in our apartment. Promise me you'll still insist on paying for coffee. Promise me that all this," she gestured to the manor, "won't change who we are together." David took her hands. "Sarah, we can live wherever you want. Do whatever makes you happy. If you want to keep our little apartment, we'll keep it. If you want pizza nights, we'll have pizza nights. If you want to continue working as a nurse, I'll support that completely. What about Chin Industries? I'll take my place in the company, but on my terms. I want to expand the foundation, focus on medical research and accessibility advocacy. I want to use my position to help people, not just make money." Sarah smiled. "That sounds like the David I married." As they sat together under the stars, Sarah reflected on the incredible day. She had woken up thinking she was marrying a struggling graphic designer, and she was ending the day married to one of the wealthiest men in the country. But the most amazing part wasn't the money, or the mansion, or the fairy tale wedding. The most amazing part was that David was still David. The accident that had injured his spine had also freed him from a life that wasn't truly his. And his disappearance, while painful for his family, had led him to discover who he really was beneath the expectations and pressure. "Do you regret any of it?" Sarah asked. "The hiding, the lies, the time we lost." David considered her question carefully. "I regret the lies, and I regret the pain I caused my grandfather. But I don't regret the path that led me to you. If I hadn't been running for my old life, I never would have been in that hospital lobby on a rainy Tuesday evening." "So what happens now?" "Now," David said, spinning his wheelchair to face her, "we figure out how to build a life together. We'll combine your compassion and my resources. We'll keep loving each other the way we did when we thought money was tight. And we'll use our position to help other people find their own happy endings." 6 months later, Sarah and David were living in a beautiful but modest home they had chosen together. Large enough to be comfortable and accessible, but not so grand that it felt impersonal. Sarah continued working as a nurse, though she also became involved with the Chin Foundation. David took his place as CEO of Chin Industries, but he transformed the company's focus toward medical technology and accessibility innovations. The foundation expanded to provide support not just for spinal injury patients, but for anyone facing life-changing disabilities. Their favorite tradition, though, remained unchanged. Every Tuesday evening, the anniversary of the day they met, They would go to their old coffee shop. David would order the least expensive item on the menu. Sarah would laugh at his jokes, and they would sit together planning their next adventure. The media had dubbed their story the Billionaire's Secret Wedding, but Sarah and David knew the real story was much simpler. It was about two people who found each other when they needed love most, who chose each other despite obstacles and misunderstandings, and who learned that the best relationships are built on honesty, acceptance, and the courage to be vulnerable. David never completely regained the use of his legs, but he regained something far more valuable, the knowledge that he was loved for exactly who he was. And Sarah learned that sometimes the most extraordinary love stories begin with the most ordinary moments of kindness. Their wedding day had been full of surprises, but the biggest surprise of all was discovering that love truly could overcome any obstacle, whether it was disability, deception, or the complicated world of wealth and privilege. As David often said in interviews about their foundation's work, sometimes the greatest gift isn't healing someone's body. Sometimes it's helping them discover that they're perfect exactly as they are. And Sarah always added, love sees beyond what we think are limitations and finds the infinite possibilities in every human heart. What do you think about Sarah and David's incredible love story? Did David make the right choice by hiding his identity initially? Could you forgive someone for keeping such a massive secret if their love was genuine? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to Beyond Yesterday YouTube channel for more amazing stories about love, second chances, and the surprising ways life can change in an instant. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our latest uploads.